All right. So I just figured I'd go live and uh, invite people. I'm actually, I should have realized my book is too long because StreamYard can't even display the whole like PDF of it. So I had to make another PDF of a smaller section so that I could put it on the screen and read it. Um, mhm. So that's what I'm going to do. Okay. And I realized that if I put it on the other screen that faces the microphone, it sounds better than if I put it on the screen that doesn't face the microphone like this. I think that's the theory. I don't know if people can tell. Before I was staring over there, now I'm staring over here. I think it sounds better. And as soon as this thing is done processing, I will put it up. So I figured I would read the longest chapter in the book, and that way it'll be done, which is on clothing. And it really should have been like many chapters. There's other chapters after this one also about clothing, but this one kind of has like a little framework that I went through. And this one was a real rough draft kind of thing. It was very much exploratory. It was something I was like, I don't know what the Bible really says about this directly, and so this was my study of that. And this is the rough drafts. This is the notes of it, with a little introduction at the beginning, I guess, to flesh things out. But yeah, that's what it is. It's about clothing, and so I will begin. Chapter 44: Clothing. Clothing has always played a significant role in human society. The right clothes can open doors and make you friends, ushering you into the presence of kings and presidents. The wrong clothes can have you thrown out into the street. Clothes are the first symbolic identifier we observe in others, and what we wear provides an opportunity to set expectations for our encounters with new people and new environments. There are several aspects of messaging conveyed by our clothing, but these signs and symbols vary across time and culture. In our own day, there is almost no universal agreement on what clothing means. People will decode the world according to a set of principles they have internalized, but they rarely communicate what those principles are. This can cause serious problems for people navigating the world. As examples, a woman dressed in a revealing outfit can claim offense at attracting attention from men. A man who tries to dress well for the workplace can be seen as perpetuating stereotypes of white normativity, while those who wear clothing to signify their affinity for certain musicians or sports teams can be accused of cultural appropriation. Many of those seeking to reclaim the lost virtues of traditional societies advocate for a return to the formal code of dress that was understood by our grandparents and great grandparents. Jordan B. Cooper articulates this ideal well and voices many of the reasons why men are drawn to this idea. You can see the video linked. Why Jordan B. Cooper, Why Do I Dress Up? Linked below. My friend Cale Zeldin tried to stir the pot by telling men to stop wearing blue jeans and nearly started a war when he suggested they give up baseball caps. The problem is that these calls for a return to gentlemanly dress are dependent on the widespread adoption of a set of presuppositions that have simply vanished from much of the world. The likely result of dressing, according to the etiquette guides of the early 20th century, is the creation of bubbles of intelligibility, where the dress code signifies in-group status, but ultimately creates greater division in the world at large. Footnote: the result of many trad movements is that their purity spirals continuously spit out any moderate voices, resulting in the balkanized landscape of 40,000 denominations that they continuously rally against. These groups always fail because real Aristotelian collectivism has never been tried. End footnote. It's not inconceivable that some outraged segment of the culture labels the tailored suit the new version of the clan hood. There is an aspect of these arguments that is useful, as Cooper rightly criticizes the idea of authenticity, but he leans on a weak structure called appropriateness to do so. There is a problem with the desire to be authentic when your authentic self is a slave to your depraved desires. But it's not that it makes culture confusing. The problem is that all creatures are directed by a telos, not a static concept of the self. Authenticity is only discovered in relation to a goal. There is no chance of going back to a traditional culture of dress. Such cultures only existed within isolated geographical areas, and much of the chaos we are experiencing is the effect of those cultures clashing through globalization and the internet. If we want to determine how to dress and how to navigate the world as it is, we need to discover the most universal aspects of what our clothing reveals about ourselves and what it signifies towards others. What clothing conceals and reveals. Much like other cultural expressions, clothing can act as a pattern language to communicate a vast array of information. To begin decoding this language, we will examine the biblical narratives. Through the book of Genesis, a variety of lenses draw out the different roles that clothing plays in advancing the telos of creation as it unfolds over time. These lenses are defined by me in the following ways. Modesty. This is the quality of concealing what is and what is not meant to be displayed. What is concealed is not bad, but often very good. However, it's something that is reserved for a particular time, place, or person. A gift wrapped in paper has the appearance of modesty. Its contents are preserved for the intended recipient, and those who might otherwise be tempted by what's inside can read the message, not for you, or in the case of presents under a Christmas tree, not for now. What is considered modest is highly dependent on culture. Many tribes wear almost no clothes, but they have some strict rules about who or where people can gather together. To be found in the wrong place with the wrong person is as much a signal of immodest behavior as being naked is in ours. Appearance. This relates to what is perceived through the senses of those observing. Clothing, or a lack thereof, can be used to enhance, subdue, or transform the appearance of an individual for a variety of reasons. It can be used to gain the trust of a group or to safely navigate a dangerous scenario. It can also be used to trick the senses, deceiving those around us for good or for ill. Office. This reflects the role that clothes have in signifying a person's role or office. The king's crown, the bride's gown, the priest's robe, and the soldier's armor are all signs of a particular role or office. This symbolic role played by clothing or uniforms allows people to quickly understand their relationship with one another. People choose who to listen to and who to ignore based on their office. Utility. The utility of clothing refers to its useful characteristics in enhancing the human experience. Clothing can provide protection from a variety of environmental conditions: insulation from the cold, a barrier from the effects of the sun, from pests, or sharp and abrasive surfaces. Armor provides extreme protection from lethal blows. Some clothes have a reverse utility, such as the sackcloth worn during times of repentance. Its scratchy, uncomfortable texture was meant to remind people of their dire social circumstances. Appearance can also provide utility, such as black clothing that alerts people to a state of mourning or a state of impurity. Identity. These are the characteristics of clothing that signify who a person is, male and female, rich and poor, and from which tribe and region. This is another area where customs vary greatly, making it important to learn the background and history of different cultures. Unique items of clothing identify a single person, and changing clothes can reflect a transformation of identity. While this is similar to the role of office, an office is an external sign towards others. The identity, symbolized by clothing or jewelry, is a reflection of an inward identity. A wedding ring is a signifier of identity in many cultures. It reflects the relational status of an individual. In certain tribes of Africa, manhood is conferred on a boy when he hunts a wild animal by himself. The hide of a lion identifies him as a man, not a boy. If someone else wears the skin, they can mimic the appearance of manhood and signal the office of a hunter, but it only reflects the identity of the man who killed the lion. Modesty. Now, okay, so I'll just close this for a second. So I think what I do then is I go through each of these different categories, like all through Genesis and then beyond. So that's why it's like each of these is almost its own chapter. That's why it's like the longest chapter in the book. Yeah. Modesty. The original use of clothing was to provide modesty, a covering of the shame of nakedness. When Adam and Eve were first created, they had no need of clothes because their innocence provided them with the modesty of a child. The man and his wife were both naked and were not ashamed. Genesis 2:25. Every child is born in a state of innocence until it shatters in the same way it did for Adam and Eve. Young children have no understanding of the why of clothing, especially when the temperatures are comfortable. Yet at a certain age, perhaps around 4 or 5 years old, they become aware of their nakedness and seek privacy while getting dressed. The other thing that happens is that at some point, a child makes a mistake, and instead of calling for their parents' help, they try to cover up their mistake on their own, usually to no avail. It was this dual revelation of being naked and having made a mistake that inspired the creation of the first set of clothes. These were Adam and Eve's fig leaf aprons. This clothing was not suitable for the task. They were trying to use it to cover their nakedness in the garden. God did not intend for his children to be clothed inside the garden. The garden was supposed to be the inside, the sacred holy place, a bridal chamber, the place where family is created. Adam and Eve's solution to the problem of nakedness was insufficient for a variety of reasons. But the problem of nakedness was a real problem. The fruit did its job in revealing the truth. It just didn't give them insights into the solution. God provided clothing that was suitable to cover them, and through the experience, they gained insight into the reality of death. The act of clothing the man and woman was substitutionary. Their nakedness was covered. The animal's nakedness was exposed. There are close parallels between this story and that of the new man of the soil, Noah. Noah's story also centers around a lack of clothing. Seeing his nakedness is something that one son boasts about to his brothers, while these other sons avoid seeing it at all cost. This strange little story points to something very different than sons seeing dad's aging body, or even his private parts, but it gives us great insight into ancient understanding of the utility and purpose of clothing. Firstly, there's the act of seeing, and what follows after seeing. When the serpent pointed it out, Eve saw the fruit, that it was pleasing to the eye and useful for providing wisdom. She then reached out, consumed, and shared. A few chapters later, There is a brief mention of events that angered God, precipitating the flood. The sons of God saw the daughters of humankind, that they were beautiful, and they took for themselves wives from all that they chose. Genesis 6:2. They saw, they took, and they wifed. Not from one, but from all. The sin was shared. These sons of God, these Nephilim, mighty men, were on the earth before the flood, but their kind appeared again after, and many cultures record their deeds. Gilgamesh was such a mighty man, a king in Uruk, the land from where Abram would later be called out. Just like those who brought the wrath of God, his might was used to take and consume whatever he desired. Gilgamesh sounds the tocsin for his amusement. His arrogance has no bounds by day or night. No son is left with his father, for Gilgamesh takes them all, even the children. Yet the king should be a shepherd to his people. His lust leaves no virgin to her lover, neither the warrior's daughter nor the wife of the noble. Yet this is the shepherd of the city, wise, comely, and resolute. From the Epic of Gilgamesh. Noah's story in Genesis 9 is vague and ambiguous, perhaps out of respect for the great man. But when we look at the specific laws God shares later on, we notice things that that clarify this story. What exactly did Ham, the bad son, see? He saw his father's nakedness, but other than seeing a saggy scrotum, what could that statement refer to? You must not expose the nakedness of your father's wife. It is your father's nakedness. Leviticus 18:8, LEB, emphasis added. This verse is the best fit, not verse 7 in reference to the son's mother. That's called her nakedness. But taking an unrelated wife of a father to bed is a common transgression by sons in the Bible. Reuben, Absalom, and the man in the Corinthian church all commit such an act. End footnote. Ham wasn't interested in Noah, who passed out drunk, but Noah's wife, not Ham's mom, a new one, like many of the patriarchs had after their first wife died. Footnote. Abraham, Job, and Moses come to mind, and also Lot, whose story closely parallels this one. His wife was lost in a flood-type event. His daughters got him drunk and had sex with him. This is also a very plausible, non-supernatural explanation of the events described in Genesis 6:2, with fathers consciously taking their daughters as wives. End footnote. Of course, that verse is telling us not to expose the nakedness, but what if you just see it? There's another scenario that fits the bill. As for a man who takes his sister, his father's daughter, or his mother's daughter, and he sees her nakedness, and she herself sees his nakedness, it is a disgrace, and they shall be cut off before the eyes of their people. He has exposed his sister's nakedness. He must bear his guilt. Leviticus 20:17. Now, this is not a good situation to have in your household, though it's similar enough to the details of Abraham's story to make us wonder if that's why he was called out of Ur. Here's the sticky part. A brother and a sister are not going to be naked in the same place and at the same time. If one of them walks in on the other while they are getting dressed, it's an honest mistake. The only way you get them to see you naked while they are naked is if one of them sets things up and the other one sticks around to keep gawking. So the presumption here is that Ham saw, he reached out, he consumed, and then he offered to share the goods with his brothers. What his brothers do next doesn't make a lot of sense if they just want to avoid seeing dad's hairy backside. But it does make sense if you just escaped the world being destroyed because of women being seen, taken, and spread around. Once you realize just how common that story was in the ancient world, the veils and head coverings start to make a lot of sense. People were paranoid about their wives and daughters being seen naked. Footnote on the verse about Abraham. The impulse to see, reach out, and take that which pleases the eye is seen many more times. Sarah must have been. This is not the footnote. This is just the text. Okay. The impulse to see, reach out, and take that which pleases the eye is seen many more times. Sarah must have been a stunning beauty to have drawn the attention of both the Pharaoh of Egypt and Abimelech of the Philistines, as both kings took her into their households when Abraham called her sister. In an unfortunate incident for everyone involved, in Genesis 34, Shechem could not restrain himself when he encountered Dinah, the daughter of Jacob. Though his soul was strongly attracted to her and he loved the young woman and spoke kindly to the young woman, this only occurred after he first saw her, he took her and lay with her and violated her. There is no indication at all that Dinah was in any way immodest in her presentation. But from what we know of the Canaanite women, Shechem was well aware of what was hidden beneath a woman's garments. When you have been served the forbidden fruit that has been peeled and laid out before you, there is little appreciation for fruit clothed on the branch. Dinah had gone to see the daughters of the land and was not expecting to encounter a young man. The customs around the marriage of Dinah's mother, Leah, were so geared toward modesty that her father, Laban, was able to send Leah in when Jacob expected Rachel. Her grandmother, Rebekah, covered her face with a veil when she approached the tents of Isaac. But to spend time with other maidens, Dinah's face would have been exposed. Even a diaphanous veil provides a symbol that a woman is meant to be treated with respect because it signifies her relationship to a father and brothers. In later years, the daughters of Israel initiate a feast where unwed maidens mourn the memory of Jephthah's daughter with singing and dancing. Footnotes. The story of Jephthah's daughter is found in Judges 11:34 through 40. Many Bible translations seem to indicate that Jephthah's daughter is sacrificed, as in killed and burnt, but the text is more ambiguous than that. She may be sacrificed, as in her life dedicated to the service of the Lord. It is just as appropriate for her friends who bewail her virginity to do so for taking a vow of celibacy as for being killed. Jephthah's sadness is also as applicable to his only child not being given in marriage, as this would also end his line. Samuel is given in dedication to the Lord, but he later married and fathers children. This is not much biblical evidence of any kind of sacred celibacy, but the book of Judges also depicts a very poor representation of Israel's ability to keep the law. When the Israelites vow, end footnote, when the Israelites vow not to give their daughters in marriage to the sons of the tribe of Benjamin, they instead allow their daughters to be captured during this feast. Perhaps this was used as an opportunity for the Labans of that day to offload their unwanted Leahs. Regardless, it reflects the less strict rules of modesty applied when maidens are not in mixed company. In contrast, the veil worn by Tamar, the widow of does obscure her identity. When Judah fails to fulfill his obligation to his son's childless widow by giving her in marriage to his youngest son, she plans a deception. She took off her widow's garment and covered herself with a veil, wrapping herself up, and sat at the entrance to Enaim. When Judah saw her, he thought she was a prostitute, for she had covered her face. Genesis 38:14 and 15. By this time, the descendants of Abraham had embraced the culture of the land they dwelled in. The sons of Jacob did not return to Paddan Aram for wives, as their father and grandfather had. Judah married a Canaanite woman, and appears quite familiar with their customs. A concealed face was part of the apparel of the prostitute, but for the rest, she wrapped herself up like a present to be peeked at, in something designed for a quick removal. We can't say for sure the nature of Tamar's apparel, but as a Canaanite, Her folklore may have included the story of the harlot sent from Uruk to entice the wild man in Kidu. Gilgamesh said, "Trapper, go back, take with you a harlot, a child of pleasure. At the drinking hole she will strip, and when he sees her beckoning, he will embrace her. Now, woman, make your breasts bare, have no shame, do not delay, but welcome his love. Let him see you naked, let him possess your body. When he comes near, uncover yourself and lie with him. Teach him, the savage man, your woman's art." She was not ashamed to take him. She made herself naked and welcomed his eagerness. As he lay on her, murmuring love, she taught him the woman's art. From the Epic of Gilgamesh. Judah seems to have been faithful during the lifespan of his wife. Perhaps Tamar anticipated a return of the wild man when Judah went to go shear his sheep. Just as Shechem lost his self-control outside the walls of civilization, Judah saw, took, and consumed. What was seen, taken, and consumed from the prostitute was not a beautiful face, but a fertile body, the sight of nakedness out in the wilderness. The harlot becomes the teacher of the wild man. She educates him and puts him in his place. Quote, "Get up from the ground, the bed of a shepherd." He listened to her words with care. It was good advice that she gave. She divided her clothing in two, and with one half she clothed him, and with the other herself, and holding his hand, she led him like a child to the sheepfolds, into the shepherd's tent. In the same way she created a bond with the wild man and shared her clothes with him, Tamar requires the identifying marks of Judah to secure future payment. When this prostitute cannot be found, Judah is embarrassed enough to forsake the search for his signet, cord, and staff. Tamar then educates Judah, exposing his own foolishness while revealing her virtue. "By the man to whom these belong, I am pregnant." And she said, "Please identify those whose these are, the signet and the cord and the staff." Then Judah identified them and said, "She is more righteous than I, since I did not give her to my son Shelah." From Genesis 38:25 through 26. This story is immediately contrasted by the story of Judah's brother Joseph, who has become a slave in the house of a powerful Egyptian lord. The problem is the lady of the house who cast her eyes on Joseph, who was handsome in form and appearance, and she said, "Lie with me." She spoke to Joseph day after day. He would not listen to her, to lie beside her, or to be with her. But one day, when he went into the house to do his work, and none of the men of the house was there in the house, she caught him by his garment, saying, "Lie with me." But he left his garment in her hand and fled and got out of the house. Genesis 39:10 through 12. Here we have a woman who acts like a serpent, a consistent voice of temptation, asking Joseph to taste her forbidden fruit. Most men can't seem to resist the opportunity, as Ham, Pharaoh, Abimelech, Shechem, and Judah all reach out and take, simply by seeing something pleasing to the eye. While Joseph continually resists, the wife of Potiphar reaches out and takes instead. In the end, nothing happens. Neither Joseph nor his master's wife actually taste the forbidden fruit of desire. But when the serpent-tongued woman fails to grasp what she wants from Joseph, she uses deception to punish him instead. Joseph maintains his modesty, but he was found guilty based on his appearance. Appearance is the next section. The titles on these live streams have been getting wild. Well, trying to get that clickbait. Yes, the pattern language. So in the chapters of the books before this clothing section, the one before that is about architecture. And Christopher Alexander is the author who wrote a book called A Pattern Language about architecture. And so it's the same thing. So I had already done that, and then I went this way. All right. Cool. I will drink some liquid. Appearance. The story of Adam and Eve and their garments can also be viewed as a story of clothing changing appearance. The problem is that they are naked, but not only that, these two naked creatures are guilty of breaking the sole rule in the garden. The nakedness of man is unique among creatures to the extent that we identify the very rare hairless animals as being naked, such as naked mole rats or the naked sphinx cat. To any who witnessed the crime, the quality of being naked would be immediately apparent. They would have stood out like the harlot of Uruk, stripped before the waterhole, and their appearance would be the first thing described. When Joseph is falsely accused of molesting his master's wife, his nakedness condemns him. The fig leaf aprons didn't help Adam and Eve because they suggest the appearance of a tree. Unless they were willing to spend the rest of their life motionless, it would not be a convincing disguise. God's solution was to provide them with garments of skin. The presumption is that the skin came from an animal and was probably covered in hair or fur. As mentioned above, to cover the nakedness of Adam and Eve required exposing the nakedness of the animals. This solved not one problem, but two. Their nakedness was covered by swapping their appearance with the animals. When the detective comes onto the crime scene, this is what he sees: a conspicuous absence of forbidden fruit from one branch, with the remnants lying on the ground. It's known that the penalty for eating is death. All the witnesses say it was the humans, notoriously nude, easily identified. On the ground are two dead bodies, male and female, bloody and hairless, naked. The witnesses saw two animals leaving the garden, but everyone else is accounted for. Judgment has already been served. The case is closed. In Noah's story, appearance leads to a question of identity, not in regard to Noah or his son Ham, but Ham's son Canaan. There is no question about who did the deed, as it says, "And Ham, the father of Canaan, saw the nakedness of his father and told his two brothers outside." Genesis 9:22. This is not the first time that Ham is identified as the father of Canaan. Just a few verses earlier, the story begins with a similar pronouncement. The sons of Noah who went forth from the ark were Shem, Ham, and Japheth. Ham was the father of Canaan. Genesis 9:18. There are no parentheses in the Hebrew, but adding them to the English makes perfect sense considering the blunt insertion of this fact following the previous statement. It doesn't bother telling us that Shem was the father of Elam or that Japheth was the father of Gomer. We find that in the next chapter, where Canaan is listed again as the son of Ham. The interesting details come in the aftermath. When Noah awoke from his wine and knew what his youngest son had done to him, he said, "Cursed be Canaan. A servant of servants shall he be to his brothers." He also said, "Blessed be the Lord, the God of Shem, and let Canaan be his servant. May God enlarge Japheth, and let him dwell in the tents of Shem, and let Canaan be his servant." Despite the clarity of his articulation, it doesn't seem like Noah has completely recovered his senses, as he seems to jumble up the details. Having been asleep and or intoxicated at the time, he learns what happened secondhand from his good sons. Yet when he discovers what Ham has done, he curses Canaan, his grandson, and he says that Canaan will be a servant to his brothers, whom the next chapter names as Cush, Egypt, and Put, Genesis 10:6. Yet when he says that Canaan will be the servant of Shem, he then says Canaan will be the servant of Shem, who is his uncle. Why would he curse Canaan for what Ham did? The answer is that at that moment, everyone involved thought that Canaan was Noah's son, his youngest son. That's why the passage starts off with the clarification of his parentage. Things are not as they appear. It's inviting us to look into the details of the switch. These details may not be really about clothing per se, but it's about tents, and tents are synonymous with clothes on the symbolic level. It's what keeps you from being naked. An elephant's hide is a hoodie for him and a house for us. So Canaan's identity is confused because he's been dwelling in the wrong tent, Noah's tent, or the tent of Noah's wife. There are a few details that could have cued Noah into this deception. Luckily for him, his sons did not take Ham up on the offer to share. Ham's assumption must have been that Noah had been performing his husbandly duty all along. But if this had been Noah's first time, what if this had been Noah's first time visiting the tent of his wife? The other details the text makes quite clear is that Noah had 3 sons. Those 3 were the sons who left the ark, and their sons were all born after the flood. Why clarify this mundane detail unless there was some dispute? And if Noah had not slept with his wife until that time, how could he not be suspicious about her giving birth? He must have assumed the possibility of a virgin birth. My Jewish friend tells me that the virgin birth is not a concept that fits within Judaism. He says it's a pagan idea from the Greeks that Christians picked up. But God's promise to the serpent was that his head would be crushed by the seed of the woman, a phrase that Hebrew scholars claim is not strong enough or clear enough to indicate a virgin birth on its own. Fair enough. But Noah had just watched the world be destroyed as a result of gods, giants, angels, demons, powerful kings, and mighty men who stole the daughters of mortals and took them as their wives. Those males, whatever their nature, were always planting seeds in women, and the result was more of the same. It's worth asking, was God destroying the world because it was chock full of people, or because Noah and his family were the only ones left? Lot's poor daughters had fiancés, but they were apparently taking it on the down low. In a time of population collapse, perhaps the biggest miracle wasn't that God brought all the animals to Noah, but how he brought them. None of his sons had children until after the flood, because they didn't have wives until the day it started raining. According to the catastrophists, once Noah and his family got on the boat, they witnessed the earth being bombarded by a series of meteoric impacts, each delivering the equivalent power of up to 100,000 hydrogen bombs. Footnote: Catastrophism is a worldview in contrast to uniformitarianism, positing that ecology is shaped more by brief catastrophic events rather than gradual processes over a much longer span of time. It's a broader frame of reference than young Earth creationism, encompassing things like the Younger Dryas impact theory, but YEC also usually supports the idea of catastrophism. End footnote. Not the ideal scenario for making love. Beyond this, the 1-year span is the same amount of time given to the women in King Xerxes' harem for the period of beautification, Esther 2:12. The purpose of this 12-month span was to isolate the women from any men, excluding eunuchs, to ensure that none of them were pregnant. If the wives showed up with their flocks on the day that the flood began, the precaution of waiting to consummate would have been wise, as any children born to the women would be of unknown paternity. Judging by the reality of situations known by us, the world in which they escaped was certainly a brutal place. Considering the abundant stories of powerful, godlike men who saw, took, and consumed young women as often as they wished, it is a tragic possibility that these women could have been the victims of previous assaults. As St. Augustine would later articulate, such tragedies do not rob the woman of her spiritual virginity, as it goes against their will, but they can result in children being born. With this wicked world serving as the background against which Noah raised his sons to be different, the patriarch would not have been suspicious of his own sons. To think otherwise would have led him to despair. Therefore, if Noah's virgin wife emerged from the ark with a baby bump, standing beneath the rainbow, it wouldn't take much faith to regard it as a miracle. It would likely seem like a fitting detail. This boy would have been seen as the son of promise, the seed of the woman, and given all sorts of special attention. So if the virgin birth is a Greek idea, we have to assume that they got it from somewhere, and Noah's little interlude seems to fit the bill. Meanwhile, we can have some sympathy for poor Noah. He had witnessed the march towards the apocalyptic destruction of Earth's 500 years longer than anyone else on the ark. Given the causal association between the sexual escapades of the B'nai Elohim and the flood that followed, Noah might need a little fortification to rise to his husbandly occasion. Hence the wine, and his attempt to make good on God's command to be fruitful and multiply. The conclusions around the details given here are speculative, but it's very clear that the identity of Canaan and his parentage was an issue of dispute, due to the tent he emerged from. Footnote. Michael Heiser puts forth a different scenario, where Noah abstains from sex after the event and then pronounces the curse after Canaan is born 9 months later. This compressed timeline view comes from the assumption that the wife of Noah was the mother of Ham, and that this was their first encounter, while she and Noah had been intimate regularly. From the Naked Bible podcast, link provided. This was the serpent's attempt to get a substitute into the enemy's camp. Ham had cuckolded his father, a term derived from the call of the cuckoo bird, who famously lays her eggs in the nest of different species of bird. As the larger cuckoo hatches first, it breaks the other eggs, and the mother, or in this case the father, feeds and raises him as his own, thinking it's the seed of a woman. In reality, it's a whole nother species, the seed of a serpent. Yet when poor Noah seems to get the details wrong, what do? We say he's gone cuckoo, crazy. Footnote. Many commenters resort to the conclusion that Noah made a mistake instead of trying to connect the dots. End footnote. Much like the cuckoo bird, Ham's eventual goal would be to kick his father out of the nest. Taking the wife of your father is a recurring theme both in the Bible and throughout history, especially for the sons of kings and patriarchs. Ham's boast to his brothers, if not an offer to share, is a signal that Noah is now too old and feeble to rule, and the conquest of the harem gives the appearance of strength and virility to the usurper. At that time, he may have revealed the true parentage of his son and set him up as the heir. Noah's solution was to banish him, and presumably his mother, to the tents of Shem, who would also foster the enlargement of his other son, Japheth, the father of the Greeks. But Canaan is no longer recognized as a legitimate son, not even of his father Ham. He's a different kind of bird, perhaps a big bully, as the firstborn who had a few years living in the king's tent. His real father was the father of lies, and the bastard Canaan must have spread a few. As the forefather of Israel's tribal rivals, he may have invented the concept of larger-than-life mythology. Themes like the fourth son of Noah, or the secret child born on the ark, and the son of a god pop up in myths so frequently that it's no wonder critics don't take them seriously. The themes of clothing, tense, and deceptive appearances return a few stories later. Abraham takes a calculated risk with his introductions to powerful kings. Though we eventually learn that his dual identities as husband and brother are legitimate, Abraham is very careful about the appearance he presents. Both Abraham and Sarah came from the civilized world, the world of deception, where things are often not as they appear. They understood the danger of naked vulnerability, and they knew how to hide their identities through altered appearance, if not physically, then through their behavior. But there was no need for deception within the safety of Abraham's tent. His son Isaac grows up on the frontier, a child of adventure, without guile. His wife is a whole different story. When she sees her new husband in the distance, her first instinct is to hide her physical appearance from his sight. She veils her face. Her appearance is a mystery to be discovered only after their covenant is secured, as she is brought into his mother's tent. When the couple tries Abraham's gimmick, Isaac is not an effective deceiver. When the men of the palace asked him about his wife, he said, "She is my sister," for he feared to say, "my wife," thinking, lest the men of the place should kill me because of Rebekah, because she was attractive in appearance. Genesis 26:7. Yet Isaac doesn't have the knack to pull this off. Abimelech catches Isaac in the act of fondling his wife and deduces the nature of their relationship. Footnote: fondling is the word used in Robert Alter's translation. Their twin sons reflect the contrast between the two parents. When the boys grew up, Esau was a skillful hunter, a man of the field, while Jacob was a quiet man, dwelling in tents. Isaac loved Esau because he ate of his game, but Rebekah loved Jacob. Genesis 25:27-28. Esau is transparent and straightforward. He appears like a wild man, and he acts like one too, recklessly selling his birthright to the crafty Jacob for a bowl of red stuff. Jacob is deceptive, which makes his unimpressive appearance an advantage. When we get to Jacob and Esau, we have a return of the garments of skin. Esau was a garment of skin. When he was born, he came out red, all his body like a hairy cloak. Genesis 25:25. He was a wild man who loved to be in the wilderness, reminiscent of Enkidu, whose body was rough. He had long hair like a woman's. It waved like the hair of Nisaba, the goddess of corn. His body was covered with matted hair like Samugan's, the god of cattle. He was innocent of mankind. He knew nothing of the cultivated land. From the Epic of Gilgamesh. These hairy fellows may have suffered from hypertrichosis, the condition known as werewolf syndrome, where the entire body is covered with hair. In a more primitive age, he may have gone without wearing clothes. Even before Isaac loses his sight, his vision causes him to notice and appreciate the straightforward and manly virtues of Esau, while overlooking the value of the tent-dwelling Jacob and his wife's preference for the younger son. Isaac's perception was weak even before his physical eyesight left him. Rebekah had received a prophecy from the Lord about her two sons while they battled in her womb. 2 nations are in your womb, and 2 people from within you shall be divided. The one shall be stronger than the other. The older shall serve the younger. Genesis 25:23. We don't know if Rebekah shared this information with Isaac or kept it to herself. The former seems likely, based on her crafty personality. She trusted herself to manage the situation more than she trusted Isaac. When the time came for Isaac to confer the blessing on his eldest son, he sent Esau on a task. His failing eyesight provided the opportunity for an easy deception. To those who could see, the appearance of Jacob and Rebekah's plan would have been quite comical. Jacob was wearing a patched-together outfit of animal hides with his brother's tunic on top. Jacob's goatskin garments wears goatskin garments to imitate his brother Esau. The hairy older brother, whose appearance is like that of an animal, is an avid hunter who leaves stripped carcasses lying around the trees of the forest, an image reminiscent of the newly garbed Adam and Eve. The disguise is put on to deceive Isaac, who also swapped places with an animal. Footnote: the story of the binding of Isaac in Genesis 22 is also about different appearances. The servants see Isaac go up the mountain to be sacrificed, then come back down with the smell of wood smoke. Without knowledge of the ram caught in the thicket, Isaac appears to have died and resurrected. End footnote. Isaac had gone blind, but his other senses remain intact. The truth of the situation is revealed in the fact that Jacob cannot hide the sound of his voice. Yet perhaps the identity of the ram has rubbed off on Isaac, because rather than trusting his ears, he relies on his senses of touch, taste, and smell. These senses fail Isaac, and he gives the blessing he intended for Esau to Jacob instead. Jacob is the next to be deceived by appearances, not by clothing per se, though veils were likely worn, but by the wrong sister being in his tent, a recapitulation of the story of Noah. Leah is sent in instead of Rachel, and he doesn't realize what his uncle has done until he wakes up in the morning. He eventually marries both sisters, an extra bride for the one stolen from Noah. Speaking of animal skin, he is given a vision by God and employs a tactic that allows him to separate the best animals from his father-in-law's herds. Those with streaked or spotted garments belong to Jacob. The ones with solid colors are kept by Laban. Laban tried to cheat Jacob by changing the details of their agreement based on the appearance of the flocks. But God revealed to Jacob that the appearance of the flock were not as they seemed to the naked eye. Your father cheated me and changed my wages 10 times, but God did not permit him to harm me. If he said, the spotted shall be your wages, then all the flocks bore spotted. And if he said, the striped shall be your wages, then all the flock bore striped. Thus God has taken away the livestock of your father and given them to me. In the breeding season of the flock, I lifted up my eyes and saw in a dream that the goats that mated with the flock were striped, spotted, and mottled. Then the angel of God said to me in the dream, Jacob. And I said, Here I am. And he said, Lift up your eyes and see. All the goats that mate with the flock are striped, spotted, and mottled. For I have seen all that Laban is doing to you. Genesis 31, 7 through 12. What God revealed to Jacob was essentially the recessive genes of the animals, traits that can be masked in the presence of a dominant gene, like brown eyes. But every once in a while, 2 brown-eyed parents can have a blue-eyed child, a legacy of a gene passed on undetected through the generations. The next critical story about clothing comes when Jacob gives his own son Joseph a coat of many colors. Perhaps there's a connection here to the sign of the rainbow given to Noah, as Joseph is destined to be another savior of the world. This coat gives Joseph an instantly recognizable appearance, one that allows his brothers to manipulate their interactions with him. Joseph's interactions with his brothers draw their ire, not only by proclaiming his visions of their future obeisance towards him, but for the reports he gives to their father. Joseph is excluded from the fraternity of his older brothers, and appearance of his special coat comes to betray him. They saw him from afar, and before he came near to them, they conspired against him to kill him. Genesis 37:18. After throwing Joseph in a pit, his jealous brothers strip him of the garment and stain it with the blood of a goat. Joseph is sold into slavery in Egypt. The brothers feign ignorance regarding the appearance of the unmistakable garment, stained with blood. They sent the robe of many colors and brought it to their father and said, This we have found. Please identify whether it is your son's robe or not. Genesis 37:32. Jacob is understandably deceived by the appearance. He mourns the loss of his dead son. Finally, we return to the story of Joseph in Egypt, where he is robbed of his garment by the wife of his master, exposed and naked in a place he should not be. In a world stripped of innocence, he is found wearing the garment of a perpetrator. His master recognizes that the appearance of the circumstance does not match what he knows about Joseph, but due to the public nature of the accusation and the evidence, he cannot allow Joseph to go free. When, in the course of his travails, he is finally raised to the office of vizier in Egypt, Joseph has the appropriate attire to reflect his office and stature. The clothing of his office disguises his identity from his brothers. Appearing every bit an Egyptian lord, the brothers speak freely in their own tongue in Joseph's presence. This allows him to discern the truth behind their motivations and set the circumstances of his test. Away from their father, the emotions of his brothers are naked before Joseph, both as they speak to him and as they speak amongst themselves. When Judah offers his life in the place of his brother Benjamin, Joseph knows that his words are sincere. Well, that was another section down. I think there's like 3 more to go or something. Post the thing. In case it's not in there, but Isaac was fooled because of his Esau-like qualities. Yeah, that's the thing I kind of observed. Yes, the world is wicked. I don't know what part that was referring to, but I'm going through a process here, I'm looking at it layer by layer. So that was modesty and appearance, and the next one is office. Office. In the Bible, there's a significant connection between clothing and a person's office. When God sent Adam and Eve out of the garden, he provided them with clothing, garments of skin. Not only were these garments more suitable for conditions outside the garden, they also proclaimed a message about Adam and Eve's role within the world. In God's creation, he made an order of the beings, a hierarchy. At the top was the man. Beneath him were the beasts of the field, and beneath them were the creepy crawly things. The sign of Adam and Eve's office in the beginning was that they were made in the image and likeness of God. Genesis 1:26 and 27. Imager of God can be understood as an office, and their role was to be fruitful and multiply, and fill the earth and subdue it, and have dominion over the fish of the sea, and over the birds of the heavens, and over every living thing that moves on the earth. Genesis 1:28. The apparel of this office was their physical likeness, their quality of being male and female, and the nakedness of their appearance. The serpent was the cleverest of these beasts of the field, and he managed to pull a fast one on Eve when he tricked her into breaking the rule. Adam went along knowingly, placing himself under judgment. Essentially, the serpent tried to take their spot. By following his advice, contrary to the instruction received from God, they worked for him and did what he said. So he was now the boss. That's how he thought it was going to work anyway. Instead, God demoted the snake to a thing that creeps along the ground, and he restores Adam and Eve to their place atop the hierarchy. By giving them garments made of skin, he's showing the other animals who's boss. They are wearing the beasts of the field as clothes. On another level, there is a kind of hide and seek thing going on here, because by wearing skin like animals, Adam and Eve are being portrayed as animals. He's letting them take the demotion. In fact, the whole of creation receives this demotion. The antediluvian age is a world ruled by animals. All mythologies speak of the ferocious beasts of chaos and the fragility of man. God promises that their son, the seed of the woman, will regain the spot on top. The passing of an office from father to son stands at the center of many future disagreements, including the death of a human. The story of Cain and Abel centers around the sacrifices of the two. Abel's task as shepherd is seen as of secondary importance to Cain's role as a farmer. At this point in the story, it seems that the animals were only necessary to clothe future humans. People often speculate about the quality and material of the brothers' contrasting sacrifices, but it's what transpires between them that is actually about Cain's reluctance to let go of his position as the heir. God prefers Abel's sacrifice because he chose Abel. He releases Cain from the duty of stepping into his father's role as patriarch. God tries to console Cain after the event. Why are you angry? And why has your face fallen? If you do well, will you not be accepted? Genesis 4, 6-7. But Cain's jealousy gets the better of him. After Abel's death, the role of Adam's office will be passed to the newborn Seth. But God has other plans for Cain. The mark he is given signifies a new type of office, a teller of truth, a wanderer who relies on the kindness of strangers. With his skills as a farmer taken from him, he shares a tragic story in return for a bite to eat. This scenario eventually devolves into a level of chaos that requires a reset, and God sends the flood. Yet human ingenuity allows them to survive, if not regain their place atop this animal hierarchy. They live in the expanding skins of animals, the tent dwellers, and the houses of the forest in the ark. God saved the family of Noah as a seed of renewal. The reestablishment of the new created order begins with man on top again. Yet here God tips the scales back in the favor of man. The fear of you and the dread of you shall be upon every beast of the earth, and upon every bird of the heavens, upon everything that creeps on the ground, and all the fish of the sea. Into your hand they are delivered. Genesis 9:2. God gives judgment of the animals into the hands of men, even to be used as food. Man is now the apex predator. The sole condition is that they must not eat the blood of the living. Animals eaten must first be killed, and their blood is not to be consumed. The role of the office of mankind expands, as God also instructs them to spill the blood of any animal or man who takes the life of another. Genesis 9:4-6. Because of these rules, Noah's son Ham has to be more circumspect in mimicry of the serpent when he attempts to rob his father and his brother of the office of ruler. He would be condemned. But his act of cuckoldry, stealing his father's wife, and boasting to his brothers, is an attempt to rob Noah of the potency of his office. Here, the garment reemerges. Then Shem and Japheth took a garment, laid it on both their shoulders, and walked backward, and covered the nakedness of their father. Their faces were turned backward, and they did not see their father's nakedness. Genesis 9:23. The nakedness they chose not to look at was not the aged body of their father, but the young wife God had provided on the day they entered the ark. Footnote. As Jesus says in Matthew 24:38, for in the days before the flood, people were eating and drinking, marrying and giving in marriage, up to the day Noah entered the ark. While this verse speaks of others, there is no reason it does not apply to Noah and his sons as well. End footnote. Instead, they cover them both with a garment, restoring their dignity, reaffirming Noah's office, just as God clothed Adam and Eve after their fall from grace. Noah then reorders the office of his sons, not through symbolic clothing, but through their tents. Japheth, the youngest by birth, is now a dweller among the tents of Shem, while Canaan is demoted as a servant to them both. This is a double demotion for Canaan. We don't know how old he was, but if Noah had believed him to be the seed of the woman, then he viewed this miracle son as a child of promise, one destined to crush the head of the serpent. Instead, the serpent had infiltrated his tent. Noah appears to retire at this time. The mother would have gone with her child to serve in the tents of Shem and Japheth, but she was no longer a wife of any man. The sin of Ham created a class distinction between children of legitimate and dubious heritage. The inequality of class was a result of seeing, taking, and consuming what was not his. The symbol of the office of God's chosen people is then changed, not to a piece of clothing bestowed, but through the act of a garment being removed. The garment of skin is removed from the men of Abram's household. You shall be circumcised in the flesh of your foreskins, and it shall be a sign of the covenant between me and you. Genesis 17:11. In Abram, the man has swapped places with the animal who shed its skin for Adam and Eve. Though it's only a small part of the body being cut, it is a total bifurcation. This is symbolic of death and mimics the means of death of the animals sacrificed in the making of God's first covenant with Abram, when God said to him, "Bring me a heifer 3 years old, a female goat 3 years old, a ram 3 years old, a turtle dove, and a young pigeon." And he brought him all these, cut them in half, and laid each half over against the other. When the sun had gone down and it was dark, behold, a smoking firepot and a flaming torch passed between these pieces. On that day, the Lord made a covenant with Abram. Genesis 15:9 through 10, and 17 through 18. The circumcision of the children of Abraham was a sign of their redemption. They were people who had already died, yet now lived. The later instructions on circumcision gives us hints at the events they point back to. He who is 8 days old among you shall be circumcised. Genesis 17:12. This applies to those brought into the community as well later on, when the strangers want to celebrate Passover with the Israelites. It is the one requirement. If a stranger shall sojourn with you and would keep the Passover to the Lord, let all his males be circumcised. Exodus 12:48. To be part of the redeemed, those who were rescued from slavery, you must be circumcised. And for those children newly born, the time is the same. If a woman conceives and bears a male child, on the 8th day the flesh of his foreskin shall be circumcised. Leviticus 12:2 through 3. Another incident brings a certain element of this story to light. At that time, the Lord said to Joshua, "Make flint knives and circumcise the sons of Israel a second time." So Joshua made flint knives and circumcised the sons of Israel at Gibeath Haraloth, the hill of foreskins. And this is the reason why Joshua circumcised them. All the males of the people who came out of Egypt, all the men of war, had died in the wilderness on the way after they had come out of Egypt. Though all the people who came out had been circumcised, yet all the people who were born on the way in the wilderness after they had come out of Egypt had not been circumcised. Joshua 5:2 through 5. The 7th day was the day of rest, and the beasts of the field would not have done their work on that day. The serpent, who was supposed to train the humans in wisdom, would start his work at the beginning of the new week, on the 8th day after creation. To restore Adam and Eve, God bifurcated 2 animals, separating their skins from their carcasses. The tool used must have been a knife of stone, as metallurgy was not developed until the time of Tubal-Cain, some 7 generations later. Thus, the image of circumcision separates the Israelites as willing volunteers into the office, as God later says, "You shall be to me a kingdom of priests and a holy nation." Exodus 19:6. It is interesting to note that this sign of office was placed on the sexual organ of the man. Therefore, his office would be seen and known by any woman or men he was tempted to sin with sexually. Though there are no examples given in the text, Perhaps the image of a circumcised penis prompted the godlier harlots to invite customers into second-guessing their actions. As the story progresses past Abram and his transformation into Abraham, the signs of office are the same for his son Isaac, the tents of prosperity and the covenant of circumcision. When Isaac is faced with the distinction of having two sons, there is a transference of birthright and blessing. These things are not seen like articles of clothing, but they speak of symbols that would have been held by the patriarch in charge. This comes to a head in the story of Joseph. Now, Israel loved Joseph more than any other of his sons, because he was the son of his old age, and he made him a robe of many colors. But when his brothers saw that their father loved him more than all his brothers, they hated him and could not speak peacefully to him. Genesis 37, 3-4. This gift of the robe is not simply a gift given out of kindness or affection. It's a signifier of the office Joseph had been chosen to bear. His older brothers were upset for the same reason Cain was upset when he chose Abel's sacrifice. It was a sign that Joseph, over all his elder brothers, had been chosen to lead the tribe after their father Jacob. This robe is a symbol of the office of the chosen heir. The word translated robe here is kutanet, which becomes chiton in Greek and likely informs our English word coat. It's an infrequently used word, especially in Genesis, where it always refers to a sign of office. At the time this coat was given, the decision was not arbitrary, because several of Jacob's sons had already disinherited themselves through their own poor choices. His firstborn, Reuben, went and lay with Bilhah, his father's concubine, and Israel heard of it. Genesis 35:22. This was a repetition of the sin of Ham, attempting to dethrone his father through cuckoldry. We have a hint about where he heard of it, as Joseph, being 17 years old, was pasturing the flock with his brothers. He was a boy with the sons of Bilhah and Zilpah, his father's wives, and Joseph brought a bad report of them to their father. Genesis 37:2, which explains why the sons of the concubines were not fond of him, but also tells us who would have shared the news of Reuben's indiscretion. His next two sons, Simeon and Levi, earned the distrust of their father when they decided to take vengeance into their own hands. Hamor, the father of Shechem, had decided to have all the men of his city undergo circumcision so that his son could marry Dinah, the daughter of Jacob, whom he had defiled but fell in love with. The two sons of Jacob killed all the men as they were recovering from their circumcision. When Jacob heard about the news, he was not pleased. Then Jacob said to Simeon and Levi, "You have brought trouble on me by making me stink to the inhabitants of the land, the Canaanites and the Perizzites. My numbers are few, and if they gather themselves against me and attack me, I shall be destroyed, both I and my household." Genesis 34:30. It was for these reasons that when Joseph is presumed dead, the leadership of the tribe falls to Judah, who then embarrasses himself by losing the signet cord and staff of his office during his dalliance with what he assumes is a pagan prostitute. The crafty Tamar knew to ask for items that were unique signifiers of Judah's office as the head of the family, as he was the one responsible for fulfilling the obligation of providing her with a husband. The seriousness of this encounter was enough for Judah to change his ways. When he encounters his brother Joseph in the guise of an Egyptian vizier, he has finally learned to take his role as heir seriously, offering his own life in the place of his brother Benjamin. Having suffered the loss of his own sons, Judah finally acts as an heir should, in respect and deference to his father, who has shown more courage than Judah by not withholding his youngest son, as Judah did with Tamar. Joseph is, of course, the epitome of a man clothed according to his office. As a slave, he wore barely enough to cover his manhood. As an Egyptian lord, his impressive dressing immediately signals his importance to his estranged family. Later on, when the Lord gives the law to Moses on Sinai, the kutanet is prescribed as a garment worn by the priests, a sign of their office. In the New Testament, the word is used in a few places, perhaps most notable during the crucifixion. When the soldiers had crucified Jesus, they took his garments and divided them into 4 parts, 1 part for each soldier, also his tunic, chiton. But the tunic was seamless, woven in one piece from top to bottom. John 19:23. When John receives a vision of the culmination of all things, he again takes note of the clothing being worn. After this I looked, and behold, a great multitude that no one could number, from every nation, from all tribes and peoples and languages, standing before the throne and before the Lamb, clothed in white robes, with palm branches in their hands. These robes are of a different sort, signifying a different office. The Greek word is stole, a signifier of royalty. When the people of God return to Eden, they do so as conquering kings. It's a lot of reading. Well, anybody can come in if they want to chat for a bit. I'm going to keep going, but Lance is watching. Ron's listening. Judah was like Esau as well, appetites overthrowing responsibility. True. All right. We'll keep going. I think there's 2 more sections. Utility. Back in the first Eden, it was not for the sake of any office that Adam and Eve donned aprons of fig leaves. Their aim was pure utility. The word used for this garment is quite unusual. It does not appear again until the time of David and Jonathan. Hagor, often called an apron here, is otherwise described as a girdle, often an armored one. The immediate utility of Adam and Eve's girdles did have a militant usage as camouflage, for which people still make garments out of leaves. Hello, Ron. You just going to hang out? I'll just keep reading. All right. And then he's gone? No, he's there? Okay. Though there is no indication that they had a notion of arms and armor, it does possess an adversarial quality. Adam and Eve knew they are in trouble, and God is now their adversary. Perhaps it also hints at the utility of what is covered. As in the rest of the text, it is the loins that are girded. These aprons were likely identical waist coverings. It was the downstairs region that was being protected here. Can you hear? I can't. Things not working? Don't mess around too much while you're driving. That's dangerous. Okay. This could also point to a bit of defiance. The discovery of their unique members brought them shame, but perhaps they wanted to gird them specifically to protect them from being taken away. An image similar to the fallen Eve is presented in the Greek myths of Aphrodite, who could seldom be persuaded to lend the other goddesses her magic girdle, which made everyone fall in love with its wearer, for she was jealous of her position. In artistic depictions, Aphrodite is nude, except for this magic girdle. Perhaps one of the reasons the fig leaf girdle was not suitable to protect the naked humans was the allure of the forbidden. The events described as precipitating the flood are much more widely emphasized in their cultural analogs. Can you hear? Well, you said something after I said that, but I can't hear you, so. I still can't hear you. Your mic's not on, or your something.
Can you hear me now?
Ah, I can hear you. I can hear you now.
Okay. I was plugged into my car. Sorry about that. So I got maybe a question or a comment. One, I didn't know about the coat Joseph owned was an indicator of his station. That's new to me. I like it. So thanks for that.
Yep.
And then the garments of skin, I've always wondered how God got the garments. You know, how did God skin the animal? Part of me just thinks, well, he's God. He could just pull out his lightsaber or just speak a word. But it's really not that important. But I wonder about the garments of skin if they didn't have skin before, and I'm kind of going in the weeds. Or was it just like they were wearing like leather clothing?
Yeah, I mean, I think it was like leather clothing. That's what I think. I know, like, so there's some. Jonathan Pajot has mentioned it, like one of those Greek, one of those fathers or whatever, has some theory about like before the garments, people were like made of light or something like that. But I don't think it fits. I really don't think it. You wouldn't get that from the Hebrew Bible, essentially. Okay. And it's like it's very much. It seems like one of those ideas that's kind of influenced by like a Gnostic philosophy.
Right.
Yeah. I mean, yeah.
Right. I want my Gnosticism.
Yeah. Yeah, well, it's like that's the whole thing. It's like we're cursed by having a material body, like that's bad. But the Bible never really says that. The Bible is always really positive about the created things. So, true. And I kind of think maybe in my view, I'm on Jacob's channel too. So I will say this is my opinion only, but or whatever. Right. But, I just think of like maybe it is like the resurrected Jesus is there in the garden. And maybe they see him doing it, like because he's teaching them, he's showing them something new. Yeah.
Oh wow, that's fun. I like that's quite a bit of fun right there. Okay, I like that.
Well, even because if you look at that after like the fall, like whatever, right after Cain and Abel, right out there in the wilderness, they have fire is mentioned in there. With when God like seals the entrance with fire, and you've got something that can cut animal skin, so that's some kind of like stone edged tool, or you got to assume they have that for like sacrificing. It basically, like, that story gives you all of the like the primitive technology that you need to have like a Stone Age culture or whatever. And then it tells you where they get the later things, later on for like building Noah's Ark.
So that's interesting. So a Stone Age culture, boy, that would. I'm just wondering, do you go from knowing God to going to the Stone Age? I never thought about that. I thought of it that way. I always thought. Anyhow.
Well, I mean, it's just the thing of like, okay, so and this was a big part of even why I'm wrote the book, was figuring out our place and our purpose and through work. It's like God created man. It says because there was no one to till the soil. So like work was part of our purpose even before the fall. Like work is that is actually something that the Greeks thought. They thought that work was like a curse from gods.
Okay.
Because they didn't like working. But that's not what the Bible says. Work is good. And so, you got to assume that in some sense, like, and God gives Adam a task, first you got to naming things. And then, things are progressing. So there is like this progression of people get better at these tasks over time, and like the use of things like tools is part of that. I mean, some of this all came from, maybe in some ways, from just thinking about the fact of like, Jesus was a carpenter. Was that just a random detail, or is there significance?
Come on, random detail with God.
Well, exactly. So, yeah. So that's the way I see it. It's like, and even I think about it as like that whole thing of the whole incident in the fall. It's not like this dividing line of like everything was great before that and everything was terrible. Like it was still like the only thing that was perfect was like the garden. It wasn't the whole world. The whole rest of the world was still all like undeveloped. So they get kicked out of the garden, but they still have the same job. And God it's like children. When children make a mistake in one thing, and then he gives them a new set of tools. So he gives them clothing that's going to protect them, and he shows them how to make clothing, so they can continue doing that. And like, so it's like leveling up,
Yeah.
That's the way I see it.
Did you? Yeah, that's cool. I like that. You also mentioned the serpent was supposed to impart wisdom to mankind.
Yeah.
Can you speak a little bit more about that? I kind of like it.
Yeah. So that's yeah. Well, So it says it's like the why. So it actually is interesting. There's like two different phrases that are used in the Genesis 1 when it talks about creating the animals. Like it says like I can't remember what it is, like beasts of the earth or something are created. But then in Genesis chapter 2, it says that God forms Adam out of the dirt, he forms beasts of the field. And it's a slightly different term. And that's what the serpent is, one of those. And he's the wisest one of those.
Right.
The guy that really said it that way that I heard it was a guy called James B. Jordan. And he's really great actually, because he's like the Protestant version of Jonathan Pageau. So he does all the symbolism stuff. But he's like a Presbyterian, so he approaches some of he sees things more in a way that fits with my brain, I guess you could say. But basically that was his thing. He said when God's taking Adam to introducing him to these animals, it's not just like give them names. He's supposed to be learning things about them and from them. And essentially, I think, I guess you could say it's like the serpent was probably supposed to test the man and the woman, but he wasn't supposed to. The test was one maybe they were supposed to pass,
like a coach or sparring or
if they had said no, God said not to eat that, then God would have stepped in and said, "Good job, you've passed. Now you can have them."
Gotcha.
So, yeah,
I like that because what it is it kind of gives me an idea of what Satan was like before the fall, his proper functioning. Like, he was the light bringer. I kind of like it that it gives him a possibly more depth than just a bad guy.
Yeah.
So, all right, I hope that's a few nuggets. So, all right. So, what are you reading today? What's the target you're going for?
So this one I started about clothing, and I was looking at clothing all through. In this chapter, this is the longest chapter in the whole book, I realized too. So that's why I figured, hey, might as well just get it over with. In this one, I basically go through Genesis, and first I looked at like what are the different aspects of clothing. So they were like, there's like a modesty, appearance, Office, that one you were listening to, and now we're on to Utility,
Okay.
and then I think the last one is Identity. And
Oh,
basically,
cool.
I just went through all the stories each time, looking at how the role that clothing played in each of those things. And then in the next chapters, I kind of do extend it towards the rest of the story in the Bible.
If I would have known all about this stuff in high school, I would have dressed better.
Yeah,
But here we are. Peterson,
yeah,
where were you? No, I like this quite a bit. So listen, I got to jump off, but I'm going to be listening. Just
cool.
wanted to jump in, say hi, and I like what's going on. Is this a series you're doing, or is this?
I'm just reading all the chapters of my book so that I have the audio
Oh,
video so that
uh,
it's on my channel. So I was doing them. I was just recording them, but then I
right.
decided, well, hey, if I just do them live, I'll just
Yeah.
edit it. I'll just edit it out later, and then
Cool.
I'll leave the live stream up there. But so I have the separate
Right.
video.
Okay. Got it.
Yeah. So that's what I'm
Oh
doing.
wow.
Yeah.
Dude, so 800 pages. How long is that going to take?
I think I'm more than halfway done now. So
How many hours?
I don't know.
Huh?
A lot. I think it's probably like 40 hours or something total.
They looking at. Well, the Bible is 80 hours
Yeah.
from Genesis to Revelation. So, okay, that's about right. All right.
Yeah. So,
But I hope I want to. Yeah, I'll let you get back to your thing. But I'm liking this. I need to kind of like bookmark this.
cool.
So,
Well, yeah, and I put a playlist on my channel, and it's just so I'm skipping around a little. I'm in the whole first half of the book is done, and now I'm kind of skipping around in the back to keep myself entertained, like rather than just going straight through. So, yeah. So I did a couple about music yesterday on a live stream. Yeah.
Right. Okay, caught a little bit of that. Now I understand.
Yep.
All right, cool. Well, I'll get back to the peanut gallery, and I'll be listening.
Cool. All right. Thanks. Okay. All right. I'll go back to that second paragraph. In artistic depictions, Aphrodite is nude except for this magic girdle. Perhaps one of the reasons that a fig leaf girdle was not suitable to protect the naked humans was the allure of the forbidden. The events described as precipitating the flood are much more widely emphasized in their cultural analogues. The thought of gods or godlike men taking the daughters of men or mortals due to their beauty is a widespread theme. Only the Hebrew Bible makes such little fuss about it. The Greek myths point to similar circumstances again and again. Though Zeus never lay with his adopted daughter Aphrodite, as some say he did, the magic of her girdle put him under constant temptation, and at last he decided to humiliate her by making her fall desperately in love with a mortal. From Robert Graves' Greek Myths. This points to a possible negative utility of a scant garment. Having the otherwise nude Aphrodite parade around with only her most intimate area covered frames the forbidden fruit for anyone strong enough to reach out, take her, and consume. There is, of course, utility to this type of dress, as the enhancement of physical beauty can be used for good. Whatever clothes or lack thereof Tamar wore with her face covering veil certainly worked to draw the attention of Judah. The Enochic literature attributes knowledge of the use of cosmetics and jewelry to a divine gift. The Epic of Gilgamesh shows a reciprocation of this idea. By accentuating particular features, the use of clothing and cosmetics could even be used to draw the attention of a god. Ninsun went into her room. She put on a dress becoming to her body. She put on jewels to make her breast beautiful. She placed a tiara on her head, and her skirts swept the ground. Then she went up to the altar of the sun, standing upon the roof of the palace. She burnt incense and lifted her arms to Shamash as the smoke ascended. from the Epic of Gilgamesh. Of course, the functional utility of such garments is also quite low. The fig leaf aprons, or any other scant garment, offers only the barest degree of modesty, but no protection from the elements. Leaves wither when plucked from the tree or vine. The garments of skin given by God offer far more in the way of utility. Goods made of leather and skin can last a lifetime if cared for well, and they can suffer much abuse. Their longevity would provide a lasting symbol of office while offering protection against the sun, sharp rocks, thorns, and thistles. The flint knife of circumcision was likely the article used to skin the animals of sacrifice, and the same was used by Cain and Abel in their work. This led to the creation of the tent and ultimately the city. While these often immobile arenas are quite different from clothes, they do provide several aspects of that basic utility. They offer the protection from the elements and prying ives, which necessitates less function from the clothing worn inside. In our current day, we spend a great deal of time clothed indoors without worrying about how our garments will hold up to the environment. Outerwear is only necessary for cold climates. In most of these biblical stories, set in the warm climate of the Mediterranean, the utility of clothing is often found in its ability to provide modesty, enhance appearance, or convey the significance of an office. Perhaps the most practical example of the utility in clothes is described as the Israelites approached the Promised Land after their long wandering in the wilderness. Your clothing did not wear out on you, and your footwear did not swell these 40 years. Deuteronomy 8:4. All right, I am going to play this little video while I go perform a task. Nope, that was the wrong thing. That was reasonably well timed. All right, I gotta bust through this. Okay, your clothing did not wear out on you, and your foot did not swell these 40 years. Deuteronomy 8:4. This miracle is both incredibly mundane and totally remarkable. We rarely notice when our clothes wear out until they are falling apart. This is a minor inconvenience in the industrialized age, but it was a major concern for ancient people. Keeping production ahead of wear and tear was a challenge. In preserving the Israelites' clothing for this 40-year span, God allowed them to focus on learning the rhythms of life according to the liturgical calendar of Sabbaths and feast days. It speaks to the general principle of quality workmanship. The fewer things people have to worry about on a daily basis, the more free they are to pursue the goals that matter most to them. While this can tip to a point of excess where people forget how to make quality goods, the vast majority of history has been an uphill battle against decay. There are not many examples of the utility of clothes until we get to the time of the kings, when they are once again girding up their loins, this time with armor made of bronze. Armor is the clothing of conflict. It is designed to protect the wearer in the harshest of all environments, when they are being actively attacked by enemies. But the utility of armor is limited. It provides a defensive advantage while reducing mobility. Perhaps the greatest illustration of this is found in the battle of David and Goliath, where the giant had a helmet of bronze on his head, and he was armed with a coat of mail, and the weight of the coat was 5,000 shekels of bronze. And he had bronze armor on his legs, and a javelin of bronze slung between his shoulders. The shaft of his spear was like a weaver's beam, and his spear's head weighed 600 shekels of iron. And his shield bearer went before him. 1 Samuel 17, 5-7. Though he was a giant, Goliath's ability to maneuver seemed to be severely hampered, and he required the accompaniment of a shield bearer. He was, much like the great wrestler Andre the Giant, likely plagued with consequences of ill health due to his enormous size. In contrast, Gilgamesh put on his breastplate, the voice of heroes. He put it on as though it had been a light garment that he carried, and it covered him altogether. Gilgamesh is portrayed as a true superhero for being able to wear the armor without sacrificing his mobility. David, on the other hand, has to accept the trade-offs and opts for the danger of unarmored combat. Then Saul clothed David with his armor. He put a helmet of bronze on his head and clothed him with a coat of mail. And David strapped his sword over his armor. And he tried in vain to go, for he had not tested them. Then David said to Saul, I cannot go with these, for I have not tested them. So David put them off. 1 Samuel 17, 38-39. David decides to forego the protection of the armor due to its cumbersome nature. In the end, his choice proves wise, as his unimpressive figure distracted the giant. The greater agility provided by his regular clothes allowed him to secure a victory. What David ultimately girded his loins with was trust in God, as he rebukes Goliath for standing against the people of Israel and mocking the true God. You come to me with a sword and with a spear and with a javelin, but I come to you in the name of the Lord of hosts, the God of the armies of Israel, whom you have defied. This day the Lord will deliver you into my hand, and I will strike you down and cut off your head. And I will give the dead bodies of the host of the Philistines this day to the birds of the air and to the wild beasts of the earth, that all the earth may know that there is a God in Israel, and that all this assembly may know that the Lord saves, not with sword and spear. For the battle is the Lord's, and he will give you into our hand. 1 Samuel 17, 44-47. David's faith ultimately came from his understanding of God's identity, and his relationship with God informed his own identity. Unlike Adam and Eve, David had the opportunity to look back on the long history of God's faithfulness and mercy to his chosen people. but the garden gives us the first example of clothing bestowing identity. Okay, I'm just going to keep going. Identity. When Adam and Eve fall from a state of grace, God restores them to their rightful position by giving them garments of skin. Unlike their own fig leaf Haggor, the armor-like girdle of defiance and fear, the garment provided by God is called a coutonet of skin, a word not used again until Joseph receives a long-sleeved or many-colored coutonet from his father Jacob. In both cases, the gift is given from a place of parental love. Though Joseph is competent and worthy of inheriting his father's estate, he is not chosen for those reasons. Rather, Israel loved Joseph more than any of his other sons because he was the son of his old age, and he made him a robe of many colors. Joseph was also the son of promise given to him by Rachel, the wife that he loved. Like his grandmother Sarah, Rachel had tried to bear sons for her husband through a handmaiden, and though both Abraham and Jacob cared for these sons, they both longed to share the experience of parenting a child with the woman that they loved. Just as Isaac was special in the sight of Abraham and Sarah, so was Joseph to Jacob and Rachel. Identity is conferred through our relationships, but it is also shaped by names. When Rachel named her firstborn son, she called his name Joseph, saying, "May the Lord add to me another son." Genesis 37:3. The name Joseph means "may he add," but it sounds like the Hebrew for taken away, a prophetic message of the life that he would lead. Joseph added much life, but his own life was taken away, hidden from the sight of his father. Much like his son, the coat of Jacob would be added and then taken away. Jacob would hold the beautiful robe he had given Joseph, torn and stained with blood, what he presumed was the blood of his own son. And he identified it and said, "It is my son's robe. A fierce animal has devoured him. Joseph is without doubt torn to pieces." Then Jacob tore his garments and put sackcloth on his loins and mourned for his son many days. Genesis 37:33-34. The father longs to take on the pain that his son has endured. His clothes are torn, he is stripped, and all that covers his loins is a rough cloth that scratches like the thorns and thistles of the world. Jacob identifies with his son. He longs to follow his son into the pit of death. All his sons and all his daughters rose up to comfort him, but he refused to be comforted and said, "No, I shall go down to Sheol to my son, mourning." Thus his father wept for him. Genesis 37:35. At the beginning of the world, while creation is still fresh and malleable, there is little distinction between what things are and what they are called. As the teleological pattern of creation unfolds, the people name new things as they are encountered. Knowing comes through comparison. Adam learns the difference between good and not good, but a duality provides only a single dimension of distinction. Very good gives context to understanding the severity of that distinction. So when Adam is faced with the prospect of the not good state of being separated from his wife, he chooses to follow her deception with his own disobedience. Now he has knowledge of good, not good, very good, and bad. This newfound perspective leads them to reflect on themselves, and what they find is they are naked and ashamed. Beyond this, they are afraid because God has taken care of them so far. They have now heard that he is deceptive and jealous, dishonest projections that reflect the nature of the serpent, something they lacked the context to understand. So Adam and Eve create more contrast to understand their context, comparing the bad of being naked with the not bad of their fig leaf armor. They trade the bad of being exposed for the not bad of hiding. The problem is They've gotten everything wrong. God points this out when he asks, "Who told you that you were naked?" Adam's desire to seek the not bad reveals the knowledge of bad that he wasn't supposed to have. This leads Adam to another faulty idea, that taking responsibility is bad, but casting blame on his wife is not bad. This results in God pronouncing a lot of curses on everyone and everything involved. This is often seen as cruel and wicked, but what God is doing is providing context. What Adam and Eve have gotten most wrong is their knowledge of God's identity. Thus, when at the end of his pronouncements, God gives Adam and Eve kutonet of skin, we have to ask, who is the one providing these garments? What is the identity of the God who clothes these wayward children? Unlike the plants and beasts called forth from the earth and the sea, the man is formed by the hand of God. The material hands are the visible hands of Jesus, the image of the invisible God. When Adam and Eve receive their coats of skin, who do they see doing the work? The conclusion I draw is that the man and woman witness Jesus use his hands to smash two rocks together, revealing a jagged edge, perhaps of onyx, the stone mentioned as plentiful in the land nearby, Genesis 2:12, or of flint, the stone later used to circumcise the Israelites before they entered the promised land. How would they have seen Jesus, this craftsman and priest, working in that land? If Adam and Eve did not know they were naked, but thought to craft girdles of leaves, had they seen a clothed man? Or did they see Jesus' flesh? Did they see a man covered in scars, a lamb slain before the foundations of the earth, slaughtered and skinned two animals, showing them the way to later clothe their children? Did they see those creatures who knew their master's voice come willingly? And were they hairy creatures like sheep and goats, or were these garments of skin simply made of skin? He would cause the ground to bring forth thorns and thistles, and make the man's labor hard, but also gave him a coat of skin. Perhaps as the years wore on, the man would notice the places where his garment became scratched and scarred. After years of labor, perhaps he and his wife would look at these coats and see something that resembled the skin of the man who made them. Like most sons, he would look back at the foolishness of his youth and seeing the young boy and young girl stealing fruit, hiding in the woods, say, "Forgive them, Father, for they know not what they do." And perhaps he found himself saying the same thing about his own son when he heard of him standing over the corpse of his younger brother, the weight of his punishment too much to bear. And the Lord said unto him, Therefore, whosoever slayeth Cain, vengeance shall be taken on him sevenfold. And the Lord set a mark, Ta, upon Cain, lest any find him should kill him. Genesis 4:15. The mark God placed on Cain was not clothing, but it was a signifier of identity, and it has greater utility than any suit of armor. It was a form of diplomatic immunity that came with a catch. No more could the green-thumbed sun bring forth food from the earth. He was destined to wander, seeking charity from those who would listen. What story would he tell to earn his bread? The story of his sin and God's mercy. We often imagine such a mark as a brand or tattoo. Both are permanent signs that remain as evidence of a healed wound. Cain's mark is often presumed to be synonymous with the mark of the beast in Revelation. However, that is a mark which people chose for themselves. Cain's mark bears more resemblance to the seal given to the servants of God. We have sealed the servants of our God on their foreheads, Revelation 7:3, who are protected from harm to come. They were told not to harm the grass of the earth or any green plant or any tree, but only those people who do not have the seal of God on their foreheads, Revelation 9:4. The same word for the letter Ta is used in Ezekiel in the same way. pass through the city, through Jerusalem, and put a mark, ta, on their foreheads of the men who sigh and groan all over all the abominations that are committed in it. And to the others he said in my hearing, pass through the city after him and strike. Your eye shall not spare, and you shall have no pity. Kill old men outright, young men and maidens, little children and women, but touch no one on whom is the mark. Ezekiel 9:4-6. An interesting detail to note is that the letter form of the letter Ta was not yet developed by this time. That was an adoption of the Aramaic script after the Israelites were exiled to Babylon. In the early scripts used by Moses at Sinai, the Syro-Phoenician script or the Samaritan script, the letter Ta is either a cross or an X, and in either case, the people being saved bore a mark synonymous with Christ. Cain also sought to protect the identity of his son by building a city and naming it Enoch, the same name as his son. This city was not a place for the wandering Cain to reside, but as it became known and recognized, its unique nature allowed him to find his way back to his son. Jared, the descendant of Cain's younger brother Seth, would later give his son the same name, identifying their kinship. The sons of Seth may have dwelled in the city of Cain. Dwelling in tents later became the locus of identity in the story of Noah and his sons. It's a story of mistaken identities, seemingly designed to refute false claims to the contrary. Canaan is the son of Ham, not the son of Noah. Noah had 3 sons, not 4. All people came from those 3 sons of Noah, and only 3 sons stepped off the ark. When the dust is settled, Ham is the least among 3 brothers, youngest in status, if not in age. Shem is affirmed as the next in line, with Japheth as his ally. Canaan is the servant of these 2. Perhaps Ham denies Canaan his paternity. He would have accepted him if the plan worked out differently. So Noah's curse creates a new identity, that of the enemy. Strife will flourish between the sons of Canaan and the descendants of Shem. Canaan is identified as a seed of the serpent, a child conceived through evil, who will embrace evil and pass it on. The warning to the sons of Israel will be, do not do as the Canaanites do. As Abram becomes Abraham, his new identity is sealed with the sign of circumcision. Abraham is the bifurcated man, cut in half, spread out for the presence of God to walk between. Abram is dead, but Abraham is alive. He has been identified as the sacrifice, the creature who gave up the garment of skin. The man known as Abram, clothed in garments of skin, could not bring forth life from the womb of barren Sarai. But the resurrected Abraham, whose skin was flayed and peeled, is now alive. Naked, but without shame, he enters into Sarah, who conceives a new life. The same identity of death and resurrection is bestowed upon Isaac, who goes up the mountain to be sacrificed and comes back down alive. When Isaac returns, he is a changed man. In the wake of his father's actions, Isaac is alone. His father notices that it is not good for him to be alone, but he realizes that none of the Canaanite women are suitable to be a helpmeet to Isaac. So he sends his trusted servant on a quest to find a wife from his homeland to the east. But he does not want Isaac to depart from the land where God has placed them. Abraham said to him, "See to it that you do not take my son back there. The Lord, the God of heaven, who took me from my father's house and from the land of my kindred, and who spoke to me and swore to me, to your offspring I will give this land. He will send his angel before you, and you shall take a wife for my son from there." Genesis 24, 6-7. The servant travels far until God leads him to the right woman for his master's son. She is generous and hospitable, treating the stranger with lavish kindness, even caring for his camels. When the camels had finished drinking, the man took a gold ring weighing half a shekel and 2 bracelets for her arms, weighing 10 gold shekels, and said, "Please tell me whose daughter you are. Is there room in your father's house for us to spend the night?" She said to him, "I am the daughter of Bethuel, the son of Milcah, whom she bore to Nahor." Genesis 24:22 through 24. God had led the servant of Abraham to the daughter of his master's household. Her actions have identified her as the one God has chosen. And the servant brought out jewelry of silver and of gold, and garments, and gave them to Rebekah. He also gave to her brother and to her mother costly ornaments. Genesis 24:53. The servant has brought everything needed to bring home a bride for his beloved master's son, including wedding garments, the spoils of Abraham's conquest. And they called Rebekah and said to her, "Will you go with this man?" She said, "I will go." Genesis 24:58. She goes to meet a stranger who will welcome her in. She is under no obligation, but because she is the right woman, she goes willingly to a far-off land to marry a man she has not met. This is the first instance of the ring as a symbol of a wedding. Gold, refined, is symbolic of purity. The circle represents the everlasting union of man and woman. The garments may have had symbolic color, white for purity or red for fertility, or perhaps blue or purple for royal status. But regardless of the particulars, they were likely the finest garments Rebekah had ever worn, designed to fix a memory of the most beautiful woman Isaac had ever seen, a memory that would last in his mind even as his eyesight eventually fades. The son of promise is waiting to meet his bride, when the veil will be lifted and they will see each other face to face. Bone of my bones and flesh of my flesh, Ish and Ishah, husband and wife. The wedding of Isaac and Rebekah represents a return to the Garden of Eden. It's a new beginning for a reshaped world. The identity conferred on Jacob and Esau through their garments turned out to be an enormous subject, one that requires a chapter of its own. But suffice it to say, what you wear does influence who you are. When Jacob wears the garments of skin to imitate Esau, he sets himself on a journey of transformation, from the deceiver to the deceived. Esau's journey requires him to smooth out his rough edges and take responsibility for himself. Jacob's wives, Leah and Rachel, also have transformative stories. The daughter blessed with beauty comes to a tragic end, while the unloved Leah becomes the blessed mother of many children. The story is a testament to the truth that God's plans cannot be thwarted. A lie spoken can become true, and a trickster can be tricked into becoming an honest man. The two sons ultimately fulfill the roles of their identities. Jacob, the smooth-skinned tent dweller, becomes the bridegroom Israel, who marries both the elder and the younger daughters. Esau empties himself from the land, giving up his right to become the garment of skin, living outside the borders in the land of Seir, which means the shaggy land or the land of hair, protecting his younger brother's inheritance from theft and invasion. The story of Judah and Tamar gives us two insights into the identity conferred on clothing. The first is that on a fundamental level, clothing can never determine the identity of who a person truly is. Tamar wore the dress of a harlot, but Judah said, "She is more righteous than I." This is a powerful lesson that should help us keep our mind open as we learn about Rahab, Ruth, Bathsheba, and Esther, women whose identities place them in precarious situations. The other insights regard the items Judah gives, his signet, cord, and staff. These are items of office, but they were designed to be unique, a symbol that identifies them with one particular man. Judah's reluctant decision to forego their recovery is an indication of how embarrassing it is for a man of his status to lose such items. With them, anyone can pose as a servant of Judah, bearing the full weight of his identity. Promises could be made in his name by brigands with no intention of following through. It was identity theft. Only in the wrong hands, the abuse of such items could lead to far worse outcomes than an empty bank account or a ruined credit score. There are many crimes that could result in people coming for Judah's head. His dalliance with his daughter-in-law was as foolish as Esau selling his birthright for a bowl of stew. Fortunately for Judah, Tamar's righteousness prompted her to secure a deposit that was uniquely exonerating. The encounter reveals a transformation of Judah's personality and identity that will be crucial later on. He finally understands what his actions towards his brother Joseph have done to his father's heart, and when he sees the opportunity to make things right, he seizes it gladly. The story of Joseph's changing garments reflect the purity of his identity through all the changes in office. His kutanet was a sign of being chosen by his father. Its ruination was the result of his brother's jealousy. The visions he received confirmed that Joseph was not chosen simply by Israel, but by God. Throughout his changing garments, from the rags of his kidnapping and the garments of his servitude, and whatever he wore in prison, Joseph's identity never wavered. Then Pharaoh sent and called Joseph, and they quickly brought him out of the pit. And when he had shaved himself and changed his clothes, he came in before Pharaoh. And Pharaoh said to Joseph, I have had a dream, and there is no one who can interpret it. I have heard it said of you that when you hear a dream, you can interpret it. Joseph answered Pharaoh, It is not in me. God will give Pharaoh a favorable answer. Genesis 41:14 through 16. Joseph presents himself with his face bare, lacking any sign of pretense or deception. He does not claim power or authority, but attributes everything good about his knowledge and wisdom to God. Joseph shares the true interpretation revealed by God, then offers Pharaoh a plan to execute. By this time, Joseph's reputation had preceded him. He had brought order and flourishing everywhere he went, in the household of Potiphar and also the prison. And Pharaoh said to his servants, Can we find a man like this, in whom is the Spirit of God? Then Pharaoh said to Joseph, Since God has shown you all this, there is none so discerning and wise as you are. Genesis 41:37 through 43. Joseph's identity, who he is, was not something that could be ruined or taken away, neither by enslavement or imprisonment or the elevation to high office. But Pharaoh sees that the identity of this man is wasted on anything less than the highest office in the land. Then Pharaoh took his signet ring from his hand and put it on Joseph's hand and clothed him in garments of fine linen and put a gold chain about his neck. And he made him ride in his second chariot. And they called out before him, Bow the knee. Thus he set him over all the land of Egypt. Pharaoh had clothed Joseph according to the identity that was chosen and revealed by God. Joseph does not simply hold high office. It's who he is. He has received the symbol of Pharaoh's authority and the full permission to use it according to his discretion. Although Pharaoh retains the highest position in regard to the throne, we later hear Joseph reveal that God has made me a father to Pharaoh and lord of all his house and ruler over all the land of Egypt. Genesis 45:8. The idea of the divinity of kings has been present throughout antiquity, but no figure represents the character of God in rulership like Joseph. He implements a plan of austerity and shepherds not only Egypt, but the whole world through a time of unprecedented famine. Yet when the Pharaoh of Exodus inherits this system of governance without knowledge of the man who first implemented it, he becomes a terrible tyrant. The difference is Joseph's integrity and identity. Though he is ultimately clothed in the garb of a ruler, he rules with the wisdom of a servant. His master is God, and his flock includes all those who come seeking help and protection. Despite the continuity of his character, Joseph is not above the use of deception. He is wise enough to use it exactly as God intends. When his brothers arrive seeking food, Joseph appears every bit the Egyptian master. It is also a true part of his identity, as he has mastered their language and customs and married into the nation. The key moment of the entire book of Genesis comes when Joseph sets up a trap for his brothers. He frames Benjamin, his own mother's son, with the theft of his cup and demands that the youngest son remain in Egypt as a slave. Yet it is Judah who convinced his other brothers to sell Joseph into slavery that steps in to take his brother's place. Now, therefore, please let your servant remain instead of the boy as a servant to my lord, and let the boy go back with his brothers. For how can I go back to my father if the boy is not with me? I fear to see the evil that would find my father. Genesis 44:33 through 34. What would happen if Judah had not passed the test? Joseph may have revealed his identity to brother Benjamin, and perhaps found a way to bring his father to Egypt by himself. The other brothers may have never known. But because Judah's identity had changed, because he was willing to suffer for the sake of his father and his brother, Joseph revealed his true identity. From our perspective outside the narrative, it's a touching reunion. But for these brothers and their father, it's the witness of a miracle, a resurrection from the dead. When confronted with the victim of their abuse, now given power over their life and fate, they tremble in their brother's presence. But the sin of Cain was undone when the older brother offered his life in place of his younger brother. And Joseph speaks as if from the mouth of Abel when he says, "Do not fear, for am I in the place of God? As for you, you meant evil against me, but God meant it for good, to bring it about that many people should be kept alive, as they are today. So do not fear, I will provide for you and your little ones." Genesis 50:19 through 21. That's the end of the chapter. That was really long. All right. To the two people that are still watching, I'm going to end it there. But the other ones are shorter, so, should have more time for chatting. See ya.